Hello. I wanted to talk to you about hormones in the heart. And I want to begin by saying ovarian hormones are tremendously protective to the arteries of the heart, as they are to the brain, the bones, the muscles, etc., etc. And what doctors have known for a century is that young women very rarely die of a heart attack. Whereas occasionally you hear about a young man in his 40s dropped over with a heart attack on a tennis court. He was never sick a day in his life. And when you look at the medical science, the coronary artery arteriosclerosis rate and heart attack rate in men, let's say it's about here. In young women, it's quite a bit less. And what we've known for a long time is that estrogen is protected to those arteries in women. But as men and women grow older, the incidence of coronary artery issues and heart attack equalizes, so that by the age of 60, the incidence of heart attack is the same in men and women. And about half the population dies from consequences of arteriosclerosis. Estrogen is protective. And so, it's just another major reason why women should replenish hormones. There's many others, of course. Now, sometimes when women have questions around hormones, and if they've had heart issues, they're going to hear from an expert, such as a cardiologist, that these women should not be on hormones. And this is one of the things I'd like to address today. And it's only a distinct number of women that's relevant to, whereas the vast majority it's not accurate for. And let me give you a little background on this. Arteriosclerosis, which is hardening the arteries, when you look at it under a lens or under a microscope, it's a very rough surface. And it's the perfect surface for a blood clot to form. And when you hear that people, men and women, who die of a heart attack, they're not dying from the arteriosclerosis per se. But what happens because of that roughened surface is that a clot can easily form on a roughened surface. And as one of my mentors told me, it's about the clot. Arteriosclerosis is a very slow-moving process. And even collateral or extra arteries can be developed to feed the heart muscle. It's not that, it's the clot. So what do we want to do in someone who's in menopause? At times, we want to look at the possibility that a clot could form there, and we don't want to do anything to enhance the ability to form a clot. And one of the reasons that young women don't have heart attacks, or it's very rare, is their arteries are protected directly by the robust amount of estrogens that are floating through their body. It's when they lose those estrogens that the protection goes away and they can get arteriosclerosis. And when they do get that arteriosclerosis, because they go into menopause and they don't get any hormonal treatment, a certain percentage of them are going to develop arteriosclerosis and be vulnerable to a clot. Here's another background information. What we know is that the birth control pill has made a major difference on planet Earth. And there's been millions and millions of women who have been treated with the birth control pill. And one of the things that you can read in the package insert of a birth control pill is that occasionally a woman's going to get a clot. She's going to get a clot in her leg vein, and sometimes that's called thrombophlebitis. Sometimes those clots break loose and they go to the lung, and there's been women who've died, young women who've died from that clot going to the lung, or had severe trouble with the pulmonary embolus that goes to the lung. Why did that happen? Well, what we learned over time is that I'm pausing. I'm saying oral. I'm saying the estrogen that you take by mouth, it does many things that are not so good. And one of them is it affects the delicate coagulation mechanism. It makes it lean in the direction of hypercoagulability. So you can clot easier. And that's why those young women, a certain percentage of them on oral estrogen, had intravascular coagulation and got thrombophlebitis from it, and sometimes pulmonary embolus. Oral estrogen. Now hear this. Topically applied estrogen, the kind that you apply to skin or mucous membranes, such as this in our organic oils, you apply that to your skin or your mucous membranes, that does not enhance coagulation. Oral estrogens, and part of it is because when you take something orally, you got to take higher dosages, and you lose much of the potency when it goes right to the liver. It's called first pass through the liver. Oral estrogens promote the coagulation mechanism to lean in the direction of clotability. Transdermal or transmucosal estrogens do not do that. So, in traditional medicine, this kind of detail is often not known. And if a woman's had thrombophlebitis, or if she's got known arteriosclerosis, and she goes to her cardiologist and she says, I'm having terrific menopausal symptoms, that cardiologist is going to say, don't you dare go on those hormones. But I assert, and there can be exceptions, that in many cases, the cardiologist, an expert in the heart, oh man, they're amazing, may not be expert in hormones at all, and they may not have gotten the knowledge that, yes, oral estrogens increase coagulability. Thus, if a woman has arteriosclerosis in her coronary arteries, she could have an increased propensity to heart attack. But topical estrogens do not do that. I'm just not making that up. That's in the medical literature. You can get references to it in my book or in an online training program for professionals. So that's one of the common concerns that women face when they go to the cardiologist. The cardiologist knows they have arteriosclerosis. Now, even if a woman has coronary arteriosclerosis, topical estrogens is not going to promote the coagulation, but they are worth paying attention to. Excuse me. Because there's a rare instance when a woman already has a clot in the coronary artery and you give her estrogens, that clot is more likely to break loose and cause a heart attack in the first year of treatment. The gray area is we don't know the research on whether topicals do that, or it's primarily an issue, once again, of the oral estrogens. But the remedy's still the same. When I run into a woman, let's say she's 60 years old, she's never been on hormones, her last period was when she was 50, and I know that in those 10 years, she develops this vulnerability to arteriosclerosis. It's called the window of opportunity. She missed the window of opportunity to be treated with hormones. But that's not the end game. So what do? We very carefully pay attention to a lot of details in the medical history and in the test results of this woman. And we make a determination, does she need a cardiology referral? Because we want to know if there's a clot in that coronary artery if we're going to begin treating someone who hasn't had hormones for 10 years. So the cardiologist does this extremely sophisticated, amazing test called the echo stress test. And they can determine whether there's blocked arteries or partially blocked arteries. And that's the best test for women. And if there is, well, the whole coagulation mechanism needs to be evaluated, because we don't want her to be hypercoagulable. In fact, we want her to be less coagulable. We want to put her on blood thinners of some kind. There's a lot of natural blood thinners. There's a lot of medication blood thinners. Mainly, number one, we can test her propensity to coagulate. There's the major laboratories in this country, like, for example, one of them bought up the really esoteric, highly technical coagulation profile laboratory that you can get some wonderful information about. Does a woman have increased propensity to clot? And if she does, we take the steps necessary until we test her and her propensity to clot, instead of being excessive, come back to normal or a little less than normal. Then we can talk about whether it's important for her to begin treatment with the estrogens, and we're going to use topical estrogens. And then also along the way, the cardiologist can determine about whether it's an intervention is necessary, such as the removal of that clot and the placing of a stent. Now, you can tell I've gotten technical, but what do you need? Well, here's what you need to know. You need to find someone who specializes in the treatment of women in menopause with hormones, that knows this level of detail, knows when to do the special coagulation testing, knows what the special cardiology referral needs to be. That's it. There's workarounds everywhere we turn. So I heard today that a woman was told by her cardiologist that she should never take hormones, even though she's very debilitated. And this is why I was inspired to do this video today, because I would not agree with that. I would say you just turn on the medical microscopes and you start seeing what are the details of that individual woman's case, and you do what you need to do, including ultimately treat her with topical estrogens. It's going to protect her arteries, and it's going to restore the mental function, the vagina, the bones, so much that is so important for all women when they lose their hormones at menopause, to replenish them. So good to be with you.